if you don't mind, why don't we just take a moment and just drink in what has just come before? Because the magnitude of it is insane. Or should I say,
Sane.
But you know what I mean, because it's asking a lot of us. So let's just take a moment and drop into a sense of the body as a whole, seated if you're seated, breathing if you're breathing, which hopefully will be the case for a while. And then in no time, or in the timeless present moment, simply dropping into the resonances of being, including the past and everything that you heard and felt and realized and were confused about in this past session, which all is sacred and totally okay. And simply resting in the silence and the stillness of your own being and your own beauty, your own wakefulness, your own awareness unfolding with each in-breath and each out-breath. And seeing if you can actually invite yourself, without striving or constraint, to be as comfortable in your skin right in this moment as is humanly possible for you. To bring some of that non-dual rigor that Katie was, embodying. No separation. So underneath all your thoughts, your ideas, your judgments about yourself, into the sort of vast spaciousness of your own awareness, your own domain of the heart, domain of the body, domain of mind, with no separation. And see if you can find a place to be at home right in this moment. It's not an escape from your thoughts or your ideas or opinions or your discomfort or fear, but it's simply the space in which all of that unfolds and is met and known. Outside of time, in no time. And to rest here as a radical act of love. And at the same time, as if your very life depended on it. Not just on your breathing, which of course we know is literally true, but on that radical slicing through the ignorance and delusion and narratives that imprison us and then we project out onto others and make for that kind of separation that Katie very rightfully, in my view, named as warfare. And the warfare out there always is preceded by the warfare and the ignorance and the delusion in here. Can it be met, known, held, and observed in such a way that in the being met, known, held, and observed, we see its insubstantiality, its impersonalness, And inquire for yourself, or examine for yourself, or bring curiosity for yourself to whether in a moment like this, you're not already whole. Jewel used that word a lot, and it was very, very moving because it's the root meaning of the word wholeness, health, healing, and holy, H-O-L-Y. And that, as Katie was saying, you're not already full, complete, already who you are in a far deeper knowing than mere thinking, mere conceptualizing the stories we tell ourselves about how someone else is the problem. Or how I used to be okay, but now I'm not okay. Or how I would be happy to be okay if only all these impediments to my happiness out there in the world would go away. And let's take a few moments to actually gaze around the room in awareness. So it's not like, okay, that's over, now we jump. But this becomes, in some sense, how it is for us, that it's an inhabitable domain of wakefulness and heartfulness. Looking around, and we sitting up here are really privileged to see the enormity of your faces and to also feel the enormity of the power of hundreds of people sitting in silence, fully present. There's an element of power associated with that is awesome. And that makes far more powerful statements at certain points in time and at certain junctures than any amount of yakking, any amount of talk. Silence in alignment with wakefulness. Wakefulness that is knowing itself. So I was struck by, in your dialogue with Katie, how, very rapidly, of course, knowing Katie, this is guaranteed to happen. But you drill down immediately to the root cause. If you're going to diagnose an illness, if you drill down to the wrong cause, you're going to misdiagnose it, you mistreat it. And what is the illness or the dis-ease that we're facing now? And to what degree could we liberate ourselves and transform the world, just as she said, virtually instantaneously via liberating ourselves? It's like a crystal lattice structure. As soon as one atom in the crystal lattice changes, the entire lattice structure is in some subtle but not insignificant or trivial way completely changed. And this has profound social and political and economic ramifications. And we're, in some sense, as you heard, in terms of humanity, it's only been 400, 500, 600 generations of human beings since the last ice age and the beginning of history and the beginning of kind of ongoing, accelerating warfare among tribes that are 99.99% genetically identical. No matter how tall or short or how we look. And so, maybe wisdom is the only sane response to delusion. Whether it's institutionalized delusion or harm or greed or othering, separation, and then of course manifesting in all the ways that, just read the newspaper for 5 seconds and you'll just get enraged or a headache because of falling into the us and them dualism. Maybe after 6, 7, 8,000 years, 10,000 years of warfare, maybe we're ready for something else. Embodied wisdom. And no one knows how to do it. I mean, it's not like Katie's telling you what the outcome can be. What she's pointing at is what the possibilities are when we learn to get out of our own way. And that's what all these meditative practices are. In some sense, different doors into the same room. And the room is here. And that doesn't mean, meditation is some big passive thing where we'll just kumbaya and reduce our stress and everything else. Which is all wonderful. But the real meditation is living with integrity, living an ethical life, living life as if it really mattered, really, really mattered. And that we have no time. Time is running out. We can see a clock where, we literally think time is running out. But time is not running out. We got infinite opportunities if we can find a way to be in alignment with our deep humanity, the full genetic component of who we are, as opposed to being lost in and attached to the us and them modalities or the I'm not good enough modality or whatever, and all the stories that we generate around why it's so because of our past history and so forth. And then never mind Trump, I mean, I thought it was a beautiful example that, you have trouble with a family member. And carry a whole genetic component of that for 50 or 60 years. And of course it wouldn't be a problem except that it's his fault, right? We all know that. It's his fault. And I got like 100 different, if my memory's good, and 100 different things that I could accuse you of over the past 25 or 30 years. That happens in families. So what better place to actually begin the process of exercising the muscle, if you will, of wisdom or mindfulness or compassion by utilizing the opportunities close at hand to not change or improve on ourselves, but be who we actually already are, but get lost when we get lost in thought and then captured by the us and them mentality or the I'm not good enough mentality. And the awareness is good enough. It's always good enough. And then what you do next, that's the future. When you know, you'll know. So if a lot of you are feeling, well, I really want to act, but I don't know what to do. I certainly feel that a lot of the time. I do not know what to do. That's a blessed state, not knowing. That's what we practice. When we practice sitting in stillness, we're practicing not knowing, practicing being rather than doing. Then the doing can flow out of the being. It's an entirely different doing because you've tuned the instrument. You've remembered what has touched us. And there's so many people here who have touched, I'll just speak for myself, personally, so many different ways, doors into this room. This room. And you can feel it. It's not just in the words or in the videos or it's in the carriage of the body. It's in the physiognomy, the face, the willingness to be present and not know and be open, and spacious and present. That's an art form, and it's something that is, a lot of people talk about as a skill. We can develop it. We can work on it. And if we're not working on it, lots of luck. I should start asking him questions.
No.
So
I
let
feel
me.
like I feel like I'm actually contributing a lot. I'm
are.
actually feeding him everything
I'm downloading
he's saying right now
him
mentally.
and just
So
I'm like
I'm good. Keep going.
I'm
Keep
the
going.
puppet. I'm the marionette.
Keep going. We're both. One of the things I love about you, John, is we're both very into the practice of emergence, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is you can get together and you can have this thought. Oh, I should speak, then he should say something.
Right. We should script this for optimal effect.
Yeah, and everything should be fair and equal. And I feel like something is moving through you, so I bow to that, and I'm actually contributing. I feel like I'm.
So
like,
let me ask you a
let's move
question.
through.
Anyway, I'll still ask the question.
Okay.
Has Trump, in some sense, hacked his way into your head?
Definitely.
Anybody else? Okay.
And I think
Who's
actually,
responsible for that? So this is like, again, yeah, I'm up here, Katie's up here, so many amazing, Jewel, there was just so many amazing people who have each followed certain kinds of threads, often, through lives of significant pain.
Yeah.
Not just like, wow, and we're all in this together. So there's a certain way in which, if Trump has hacked his way into your head, whose responsibility is that? And what does that even mean?
And I think part of me actually enjoys it and feeds on it and actually has a quite satisfaction finding one more thing to get upset with him about.
Because and that's why you go out and that's why you go out and buy the newspaper the next day.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
See what
or just
feeds
download.
Yeah. So Trump is also present with us.
Yeah.
Along with all these other experiences, and there's a way in which I think the directness that Katie had spoke to requires a certain responsibility towards where does suffering actually start and where does it end. And it's easy to think that it has started somewhere else and it ends somewhere else. And I feel like the invitation that you're making and that she's making is to say, no, it starts and ends with us. And no matter how wonderful and beautiful and perfect whatever leader we imagine could be, the suffering stops and ends with us.
It also doesn't mean that you don't act. Right. It's not the dualism of active passive. It's non-dual. Wisdom, non-dual. But it does not mean that you don't act when it's time to act. In the same way as it doesn't mean that you don't sleep just because you're a fan of wakefulness. There are times when it's really not wise to stay awake. We need our sleep.
Yeah.
Okay? But when we're awake, you can ask yourself, actually, how awake are we? Or are we in the narrative of how awake we are and what great meditators we are and how great Byron Katie is, and just light years away from what's being pointed to? So this is in some sense where the rubber meets the road for us, and I'm in complete alignment with you, Soren, that if it was you that said it, but that, what's unfolding is perfect. Why? Because it's unfolding. and that it's, in some sense, had it unfolded differently, we could have stayed asleep to a certain kind of dis-ease that now it's almost impossible to stay asleep to. And that brings up perhaps a lot of fear, and in some communities a lot more fear than others because it's more proximal. But if you're a feeling, sensing, breathing person with compassion and empathy, then we're feeling that fear, that pain. And, in the work that we teach, called MBSR, we teach people to turn towards all of the unwanted stuff that's in your life. Why? Because it's already here. And to approach it with kind of welcome mat and curiosity and an inquiry too, a deep inquiry is like, am I my pain? Am I my fear? Am I my suffering? And I don't mean like, ask yourself and then think about it. I mean direct penetrating into awareness and apprehending whether in this moment, no matter how much pain or fear or anxiety you're in, whether that is the full story of who you are or who's meditating. And one of the beauties of this work over the past almost 40 years, just to talk about MBSR, is that we don't ask people their political persuasion when they come in with back pain or cancer or heart disease or any chronic anything. We just assume, oh, another full-blown miraculous being has come into the room. And we don't look at the diagnosis either. Everybody comes with a diagnosis. As a rule, we don't look at the diagnosis because we want to meet the human being. How many of you use hospitals ever? Dangerous, but sometimes necessary. Raise your hands up high. I want to feel that. How many of you go to the hospital sometimes? Okay. So now it's all electronic medical records, but every time you walk in the door, they need to know you've walked in the door because they need to charge you. And that's called an encounter form. But we've noticed over the years that the business of medicine is into the encounter forms more than it's into the encounter. If you're not careful, you could go through a whole visit to the hospital or stay in the hospital and never be met, never be encountered in an open-hearted spaciousness of not knowing and beyond the diagnosis or the treatment, like a human being in the bed or in the chair. And when you turn that around, when you exercise or catalyze an orthogonal rotation in consciousness, same hospital, same patients, same doctors, same everything, only everything's different because we've got mindfulness. And so we can see, feel, hear the actual lattice structure of being. And we have an infinite number of degrees of freedom of how we are going to be in relationship to what we don't like, feeling, say, disregarded.
Right.
You know?
I think that level of attunement allows us to feel into what the response that needs to come through in that moment versus the repetitive.
And then you don't need to be wounded about it. Because when you're honest, you just take care of it. In that moment, it evaporates, and then you just reel with, but you don't take it personally. So this is one of the most powerful elements of any kind of mindfulness practice, is to recognize how easy it is to take personally that which is not personal. Whether it's Trump or whether it's, fears of what's going to happen or anything. These are narratives that may be true to a degree, but to a lot, it's like this whole thing about false news is very interesting because, there's a lot of dissimulation, propaganda, and it's always happened in dystopic times and in, pre-fascist times and everything else. I mean, Goebbels has a great quote about, just keep telling the lies long enough and big enough and find a scapegoat, and everybody will, be happy. But at the same time, if we can apprehend that, then we can also see that a lot of the stories we tell ourselves are false news. And you asked Katie, what's new? You did ask Katie.
What is real news?
Real news. And there's a line from a Wallace Stevens poem, which is in Coming to Our Senses. I don't remember the whole poem, but the last line is, and it's all about bombs falling on cities and everything else. I mean, it's like a real poem of pain and desolation, destruction, and blackout. And the last line is, the real news is there's no news at all. No news at all. So when we, sort of face the challenges of this era, if we're not taking this sort of orthogonal wisdom perspective, then we're going to get caught constantly and blame it on the other without recognizing that it's a kind of, we're participating in a certain kind of game or unfolding where a lot of the news is questionable. A lot of the facts are actually questionable. I mean, if you ask me a lot of facts about American history, I have my own view of American history, but I don't know that much about it, I'm sorry to say. But a lot of the time when we think about American history, we fashion it so that it's our story of the American history. It's like based on our facts, or our forgetfulness or whatever it is.
Or one segment of the population story.
Yeah, exactly. Like not interested in, slavery. that's so, can't we get over slavery? No. Because we've never done the healing. Jack Kornfield, I think, said, truth and reconciliation around the legacy of slavery is non-trivial. What about the Native American genocide thing? So we can point our fingers at the Palestinians and the, everywhere in the world where, if only they had what we had, they would be so enlightened. Look at us. So there's a certain dis-ease of the body politic, and I think Katie's absolutely right. If we're not willing to align ourselves with what's deepest and best and most beautiful in us on a virtually moment by moment and everyday basis, then the prognosis is that we're going to just get more of the same. And there'll be an enormous amount of harm potentially. We need you said third way, or an alternative way of dealing with this. And I think, people in this room, I have an enormous amount of optimism and faith. And not just this room, but the sort of online world and all the other worlds that intersect with this, that, this is our curriculum for the moment. This is our curriculum. What does it mean to be human in this kind of a time, and to lead with our humanity as opposed to leading with our fear without denying the fear? So what's your sense of,
I think,
going
Glennon Doyle
forward?
said something the other day where she's like, sometimes it's great to hit rock bottom because that's where you can push off from.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's something that's happening that's allowing a pushing off. And I feel like there is an emergence of two forces that are happening in the world. You said, are we going to respond with fear, or are we going to respond with presence? I can't remember exactly the words. And I feel like wakefulness. Potentially there can actually be a movement that arises that's based on inner transformation and that is non-oppositional. And I don't think we can look to our parties, to our political parties.
And it strikes me,
to show us this third way.
You notice there have been a lot of aerial photographs of the mall in front of the Capitol, which people are taking personally around how many people are in this photograph versus that photograph and so forth. Do you know that? Imagine 2 or 3 million people on the mall sitting in silence. Just imagine it. Yeah. Or in 500 cities in the United States and around the world. Yeah. Aligned with and affirming our humanity, our wakefulness, our open-heartedness, and our, as Thich Nhat Hanh likes to say, being peace. Yeah. Being peace. Being wise. Being generous, grateful, compassionate. These are all aspects of our humanity that are cultivatable. And if I was in Europe when the election happened, and I can tell you, I was in Germany and France in those 2 days, and boy, they were really bummed out by the election. And my message was very simple. If mindfulness was absolutely essential to the well-being of the planet, which I believe it was, and to the well-being of humanity and our country and everything else, on November 8th, it was just infinitely more so since November 9th. That means we got our work cut out for us. But it's this, without the interior work, without the orthogonal transformation, without the wisdom taking the lead, then we're probably not living up to the original impulse that invited us, that got our bodies into this room, got our bodies to Wisdom 2.0. So we've run over time. I don't want to, we got Dan Harris coming up next, so how cool is that?
Yeah.
So I just want to express my gratitude, first of all, to you, just boundless, because you always manage to do it and always manage to seem fresh and not like rebaked or sort of repackaged. Just infinite gratitude for your holding this space like this. And then, even more importantly, because like if you build it, will they come? Your infinite gratitude to you and that original impulse. And I would ask you to actually meditate on it, reflect on it, do inquiry on it. What is it that really, 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 really brought you here to this conference? Whether you're sitting at home in, Kuala Lumpur or Moscow or wherever it is, or your body is here. What is it? Why are you tuning in? What is that? And I would just venture to say that that is wisdom and that is trustworthy. And so you can, in some sense, we can put our trust in that and then put our bodies where they need to be with full embodiedness, full presence. So thank you, folks.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
And
I just want to say, I guess one of my biggest lessons in doing the event and keeping things fresh is that something emerges when we're okay with space. Or something emerges when we're okay not knowing. And something emerges when we can sit with what we might call emptiness and then see what wants to fill that, not because we want to fill it, but because life moves in to fill it. And I feel like my work with you is always a continual dance in feeling into a space that allows what wants to be said to be said. And I just so appreciate, John, your willingness to kind of go into places, into that unknown, and feel into the words that want to come
Soren.
forth.
I just got to say that just so it's understood, because I said that thing about millions of people sitting on the, the mall, that what you're talking about, that's the real meditation. It's like life is the real meditation practice, not sitting. Sitting, really important, but there are an infinite number of doors into the wakefulness. But if you just sit and you're like, this is my practice, it's great, but it's not mindfulness. It's got to translate into everyday life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Dare I say, the full catastrophe of the human condition. Because that's the magnitude of the challenge. That has to be the magnitude of the love.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.